All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello,
Welcome. I'm Dennis.
I'm Sam.
Welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel, our much anticipated, much ballyhooed, at least for us, talking about the start of our capsule reviews. But first, let's do some housekeeping here. We are Fate's Wide Wheel, a Quantum Leap podcast. You can find us online at fateswidewheel.com, on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather this week, so I apologize in advance for any of that. Try that again. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that at Fates Wide Wheel. You can also find us on YouTube by searching for Fates Wide Wheel or look in the show notes. I got the link there. And Patreon too, patreon.com/Fates Wide Wheel. So find us there, rate us, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We love it. Spread the word. We love you. And with that, Sam, I'll pass it off to you for how's this going to go? This is your brainchild. This scoring system is your brainchild.
Yeah, so basically we have a little intro that we will do on these episodes. So I'm just going to dive right into that right now. So listeners, observers, leapers, welcome to Quantum Leap Revisited with Fate's Wide Wheel, our capsule-sized reviews of the classic series. Our mission is to rank the show on a scale of 1 to 10 based on 5 different categories: writing, directing, acting, production values, and mythology. Each category is weighted based on importance. Writing, directing, and acting are each worth 25% of the average, production values are 15%, and mythology just 10%. Our original review sought to stimulate discussion, contextualize the episode based on when it was set, when it aired, and when our discussion took place. Of course, we also provided background information and our personal opinions of each episode. That and a whole lot more. As we've mentioned a couple of times, we spent more time talking about Quantum Leap than Quantum Leap was actually on the air. We're proud of those reviews, and they will continue to be available for listeners in our archive, whether they were 3 hours long, 2 hours long, or in some cases an hour and a half. But meanwhile, we wanted the opportunity to revisit the episodes with only our opinion of the categories above, giving listeners a compact rating of each episode of the classic series in the lead up to the premiere of the new series in the fall of 2022. Have our opinions changed? For the better, for the worse? Will this new rubric yield results that surprise even us? Step into the accelerator and find out as Fate's Wide Wheel revisits Quantum Leap one leap at a time in 30 minutes or less. That's the goal.
In other words, if you've been following us on social media for a while, but anytime you see us pop up in your podcast thing and you see 2 hours, screw that. This is Fates Wide Wheel 2.0 for you. With that, excuse me again, let's dive in. We're talking about the pilot episode. It aired originally on Sunday, March 26th, 1989. It aired as a 2-hour special TV movie. Leap dates were February 14th through 17th, 1956 at Edwards Air Force Base in Blackfield, California, and also August 26th, 1968 in Waco, Texas. The episode was written by, of course, Don P. Bellisario, directed by David Hemmings, and going to give you the TV guide description. This is a shout out bar back to what we used to do with the old version. Again, I'm going to hold it up here, reading this out of Matt's invaluable book, Beyond the Mirror Image. We also have this linked in all of our shows. Here we go. TV guide debut. Sam Beckett, Scott Bakula, learns the hard way that you can't go home again when a botched time travel experiment has him pinballing through the past 30 years, assuming the identities of people he never knew and getting no help from the observer, Dean Stockwell, his holographic partner in the experiment. In the opener, Sam turns up in 1956 as a test pilot with a pregnant wife. Also worthy of note that this won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Cinematography in 1989.
How about that?
All right. Do you want to jump in the first category for acting?
Yeah, so acting. This is an interesting category for the pilot episode because I feel like in a lot of pilots, we get cast members that aren't fully dialed in yet. And that's not true here. I feel like both Scott and Dean are pretty much dialed into the characters. Now, will the characters evolve and change as the series progresses? Absolutely. But as far as just judging this based on the pilot alone, Scott and Dean are fantastic. And I think that that's something that we'll say a lot over the course of this. And part of what I really want to do when talking about the acting is talking about the other actors that are on board. Because I think that that's where we find a wider range of maybe the quality of the acting. However, in the pilot, I think that they're really lucky right off the bat to have an incredibly strong supporting cast. I think everyone does a wonderful job. Jennifer Runyon and Bruce McGill, W.K. Stratton, John Allen Nelson, who plays Bird Dog. Everyone does a really, really wonderful job in this, right down to the child actor who plays the son. So I actually gave this a pretty high score, and this is a score that I probably won't give a whole lot, but I felt pretty confident in doing it for this one. I gave it a 9 in the acting category.
Fantastic. Everything that you said, what I love, you said, Sam and Dean were obviously dialed in, and everybody else too. And this has to be different, especially all the first season episodes have to be different because the actors, like, they have no idea what show they're coming on to. I remember one particular actor, I can't remember which one, but she's one of Peggy's friends, like one of the housewives in the scenes in the kitchen in the house
Yes.
that they keep cutting back and forth in between. When she was shooting the pilot, she wasn't really clear what she was doing and like didn't know if there was a possibility for her to be picked up as a series regular. So you didn't really know what they were on board to do. I'm going to criticize the pilot later on for the fact that sometimes the 2 hour running time does not feel justified. But what I think the running time does allow, it allows there to be moments for everybody to like breathe in and like do some like really nice slow scenes that you don't get later on in series in the 1 hour episodes.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm thinking the car scene between Sam and Peggy where he tries to confess who he is. Before that, the bar scene when they're at the officers club when Sam has that monologue just like taking Peggy in. And also towards the end when before Sam takes his flight in the X3 where Peggy tells him to promise him something. That quiet scene in the morning before they take off. All of the actors were great and wonderful in this. Didn't give it as high 9 out of 10 because I'm saving for the 9 and the 10s for the scenes that like they have like the really emotional gut punch. I'm going to save it for those. So I gave it an 8 out of 10.
I think that's fair, and I think that one of the things that might have bumped it up for me to even with what you were saying is some of Scott's acting, and I know that I said that I didn't necessarily want to focus too much on our regulars because they're always so solid, but some of Scott's acting in the pilot is really just on par with the best work that he does in the entire series, as far as I'm concerned. From the moment he wakes up disoriented to the those quieter moments, as you mentioned, the car ride back is one of my favorite moments when he's seen the Burma Shave commercial. There's something about that quality that he's seeing something that he knows is in his past, that he realizes that that's something you don't see anymore, where he comes from, and yet it strikes a chord with him, and it's a really remarkable piece of acting as far as I'm concerned. And then of course the phone call with his father. I think that those 3 moments in particular really just kind of elevate it for me a little bit. But yeah, I agree with everything you said too. And I think that, when it comes to scoring things, like if we're only 1 point off, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
Like,
yeah.
Sure. So cool. We did it. We did our first category.
Excellent. There we go. Awesome. Directing. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. It's funny when you mentioned the Emmy win for cinematography, it made me almost kind of rethink this, but I'm going to stick with it. I feel like the directing in this episode is perfectly fine for the most part. I think it's pretty workmanlike. I don't know that there's too much that stands out for me. If I'm being completely honest, I feel like the baseball leap at the end of the episode has some better directing than what has come before. So for me, I ended up giving it a 7, which is still pretty solid. I don't think there's anything wrong with the 7. I think I teetered even on knocking it down lower to a 6, but ultimately there are some very successful moments throughout the course of the episode. It just doesn't do anything for me that makes me feel like, wow, the director had a hand in this that really elevated it.
Absolutely. I agree. Everything you said, I don't know if I have anything really more to say beyond that. I don't know whether to dock this in directing or production value. So I'm thinking that docking it a little bit of both is there's just a lot of showing of stock footage.
Yeah.
They burn a lot of time showing stock footage. And I don't know like how much of that was padding. And I also know Don Belisario was very self-conscious about overwhelming the audience with something that he thought was very high-minded and weird. So I don't know if he was like trying to build in time for the audience to like soak in and figure out stuff that was going on. So yeah, I'm knocking it a little bit for the stock footage, and also, and I'm sure there was a reason after the fact why they did this, but why do they overdub Tina's voice at the beginning of the episode with
Yeah.
Deborah Pratt's voice? I love Deborah Pratt's voice. Nothing
Oh
against
yeah.
Deborah Pratt, but like once you notice it, once you realize that entire scene that that actor is being overdubbed, it just hits you weird.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
So what was your score?
7 out of 10.
Oh, all right.
Same
Well,
one.
we're in
Same one.
agreement. We're in
We're in
agreement.
agreement. Yeah.
So let's head over to the writing. Writing is another aspect where I felt like this episode is particularly strong. I think that something that television pilots in general have going for them is that extra time. You know, they've had that longer sort of incubation period or gestation where they've been able to, really get worked on more than in general you see future episodes. You know, future episodes sometimes are cranked out within a week, whereas a pilot sometimes has months and months, sometimes even years, depending on the process that it goes through to go through draft after draft after draft. I know that this is an idea that Belisario had quite a few years prior to the production and airing of the pilot. I would venture to guess that he didn't write anything until, a little bit closer to production. But that said, he certainly had more time writing this than he probably had writing other episodes throughout the course of the series. And I think it shows. I think it's very well written. I think that the dialogue feels very natural. There's nothing that feels stilted about it to me. A lot of the moments play really well, especially those more natural moments. You mentioned the kitchen scene earlier. With the wives. I think that that's a really wonderful scene, and it just feels very lived in. And part of that is due to the writing. The Sam's through line of not only wanting to figure out who he is, how to get home, but then that thing that he's forgotten that he can't remember, and then with his father, and realizing that his father died in 1974, that he has this chance that he could call him, trying to remember the phone number. Like there's some really wonderful things that are peppered in throughout. Another thing that's interesting is like we get this drop that Sam leaps before the project was ready, which is something that we know that the new series will tip its hat to, because that's what Ben will do as well. So writing overall, I felt it was very strong, and I gave the writing an 8.
Same here. I won't bury the lead. 8 out of 10. Same thing. For a lot of things you just said, the one thing I really liked about the pilot and the first season, the series falls into the trap, and we talked about this during our first run through, is as the show goes on, it kind of falls into the trap of the villain of the week.
Sure.
Or the murder of the week, or the violent death of the week.
Right.
And what I like about the pilot is that we don't have that. We don't have a bad guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I really enjoy that. And it's just like Sam trying to like everything you just said, like try to figure out what's going on, but like he's just surrounded by genuinely good people, and he almost feels guilty that he is not Tom.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's not the person who he's supposed to be.
That, that was something I remember us talking quite a bit about in our original episode, about the fact that like there's a point where Sam is just sort of like, hey, if I gotta stay this guy forever, I could do that. Like if I, if this is my life now, and that was a really interesting aspect of the character.
Absolutely. So yeah, 8 out of 10.
Excellent. So that brings us to production values.
Sure.
Now, as you mentioned before, this episode, and there will be many others in the series, makes a quite liberal use of stock footage. And I do think that that hurts the production values of the episode, especially watching from a 2022 standpoint, much less 17, 18 when we first started doing this. And so I think that it definitely takes a few knocks for that. That said, there are some pretty incredible moments in the pilot, and it's clear that they did, they spent some money on this. They were unable to get real footage of this aircraft flying in the sky. They had to use stock footage for that. But you take a look at some of the production values that they do have, being in the airplanes being on the airbase, utilizing a baseball diamond. Like, not that that's necessarily wildly expensive, but
Sure.
it looks good. And so I really had a difficult time coming up with a score for this one because there were times when I was just sort of like, oh man, is this a 5 or a 6? But there was enough that helped me to bump it up. I gave it a 7. And one of the other things that I even said to you when we were talking about doing this is that the hologram effects are actually pretty good in this episode, all things considered, for their first time out. And one of the things I mentioned to you is it's going to get better, but it's also going to get worse.
Yeah.
so
There's yeah,
so for that fact alone, and a couple of other things, yeah, I gave it a 7.
sure. Excuse me. Same thing, 7 out of 10 for a lot of things. The stock footage. There was I do often overlook because it's at the very beginning of the series. Is like the zooming through the clouds.
Sure.
Like that whole thing is wonderful introduction, great start to the series. The future sequence at the very start, I appreciate that, the detail that they put into that, of
Yes.
Al driving down the road and that there. And also, and I'm just now remembering this, but you were talking about, like, the stock footage of the X2, yeah, of the X2. Like when they had the X2 in the hangar in the one scene between Sam and Al, when Al explains to him like the string theory of quantum leap. I remember reading, I think this may have been in the Quantum Leap book, talking about how they could have gotten a substitute, like a real substitute, something like the X2, but not quite like it. But Don Belisario was like, no, Air Force people will know the difference. So what you see in the hangar is actually, I don't know if it's a fiberglass or it's some kind of model that they just built,
Wow.
because Don Belisario, with his background, he knew that Air Force people would know the difference between the aircraft that they could get and
Yeah.
what the X2 was actually supposed to look like.
I mean, and I applaud them for that, for wanting to have that verisimilitude, because there are a lot of shows that would have taken that shortcut, especially in 1989.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Last one, mythology. This is the one I have stuff to say on, so I'm curious to
Yeah.
see where you fall.
So I may end up looking back on this at some point and saying like, why did I do that? But the truth is, it's our pilot. It establishes everything. And I feel like there are so many pieces of character and so many pieces of backstory, and enough information about the project itself, that it's hard to knock an episode that sets the table, especially if people decide to rearrange, some of the dinnerware at a later point in time. So I went ahead and I gave it a 10. I gave it a 10 because, again, it's like I said, it sets the table. So I felt like it deserved that, I guess. I don't know.
Sure.
I can tell that you don't agree. I can't wait to hear
I
what you
was
have to say.
I
But
was
yeah,
not as kind. Yeah,
yeah.
I gave it a 4 out of 10. Um, and
Wow.
and I and I
Wow.
and everything that you said, valid points, but I'm putting it up against the fact that if you put this series on the air now and just even know what we know about the thought that they have put into the new characters for the new series and their backgrounds that they have, now when you write a show like a sci-fi, especially a sci-fi show like this,
Sure.
I feel like you got to come in and you got to have, I know a lot of times they call it the series Bible,
Yep.
like you got to have a deep understanding of who these characters are. And I think at
Yes.
their root they got Sam and Al, but a lot of details they did not. I mean, just specifically, um, everything from the questionnaire, the Ertzberger test, or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
all of the stuff that you learn about Sam in that quiz does not turn out to be the Sam Beckett that we get in the series. The
Sure.
Sam Beckett we get in the series does not get expelled from college for streaking. He
Right.
wasn't hung up by miniskirts and pantyhose in college. And you could
Right.
try to do some PCR, post creative rationalization, and say that Sam had a Swiss cheese memory, he wasn't remembering it all. But no, when they wrote this, the idea was, here's a man with amnesia, and here's a thing in the show that gives him some of his memories back.
Well, I
And
think that
that turns out to be wrong.
yeah, and you know what? I think that one of the crimes, if you will, that they commit in that particular instance, is that they're going for the laugh. They
Yes.
wrote that scene to be humorous as opposed to allowing the scene to be humorous.
Yeah.
And I think that, by having those answers be, written for, yucks instead of it being written to tell us something about the character, but potentially being done in a humorous way, that ends up being kind of the failure of that scene. Uh, I'm not going to knock it as low as you are, but
Sure.
I totally see what you're saying.
Sure. And I got one more thing. I don't know if this is going to fall under writing mythology, but I'm going to put it under mythology.
Hmm.
It's like it is really murky how the project feels about Sam's leaping prematurely.
Fair.
And I think I made this criticism when we did our original view. It's like the first scene, like holy crap, he's leaping, he's not ready to. As soon as Al hears from Gushy, he is speeding back to the project.
Right.
That does not match Al's tone when he shows up in the hangar with
Right.
Weird Ernie giving the debrief it, and he's just like, "Hey, isn't this great? This is
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, this hologram. It's just," and he never like I would expect him to be walking up to Sam and going, "What the hell did you do? What are
Sure.
you doing? Whatever." And like the fact that they lost Sam, they can't retrieve him. Al is just very nonchalant. And then after Sam's first leap out of 56, in that 6 days while they're waiting for him to land somewhere else, they have a huge party
Yeah.
to celebrate, which is weird because they they've lost Sam, like they can't retrieve him, they can't get him back. You know
Right.
what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So it's like there's this weird murkiness about how the project is supposed to feel about Sam leaping.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing we can certainly say about the new show is that this isn't the type of project that's going to be
Nope,
having a party anytime soon.
nope, nope.
You know, yeah, it's funny because I'm of two minds on that. On one hand, it's like I get it; they're celebrating the fact that like their theory worked, that he changed things for the better, and
Sure,
he leaped. That's cool. But you're absolutely right. The fact that he doesn't just show back up there and they still decide to have the party, like. So
sure.
yeah, I get it. I get
And
it.
and especially since I'm putting this under mythology, is because we later on find out that Sam and Al are incredibly close.
Yes.
They are best friends.
Yeah.
You do not get that in this
No.
first episode.
It's
This is
the
a job for Al in the
it,
first episode.
it's the reason why I have said multiple times that in some ways, Honeymoon Express feels like a soft reboot because I feel like
Yeah,
Honeymoon Express does a far better job of establishing the relationship between Sam and Al than
absolutely.
any other episode in the first season.
Yep, I agree.
So I get that, and it is making me question my score. But I think, and again, one day I might look back and be like, I was too kind. But I just think, just by virtue of the pilot, I'm gonna stick with my score. I'm not gonna
Sure,
modify anything here on the fly. Although that's not against the rules. I will say that if
sure.
out of the course of our discussion we decide like, maybe I should change this. But one of the other things is I think not to pat myself on the back is interesting about the way that we've decided to weight these averages is that the mythology is only 10%. So having a low score here or a high score here does not have as much of an impact on the overall score as like writing, directing, and
Sure,
acting. So I think that it'll be interesting to see how that little bump affects us down the
sure.
road.
So what
Because
was your
obviously here it
overall?
does.
Yeah. So what was your overall score?
Yeah, so my overall score ended up being an 8.05. And the reason why I mention that is because the other way to look at this is based off of like a percentage, like I'm giving it a grade on a test. And that 0.05 I would actually round up. So technically this episode gets an 81%, which is rather high. And I think might be a little bit higher than it should be. My first go round when I first went through and did this, I my scores were a little different, and my score actually ended up being a little bit lower. It was at 78%.
Wow.
But after some thought, I was a little generous. I was feeling kind.
Sure.
So yeah. So overall, I'm sitting at an 81%.
I'm at a 7.2.
Yeah,
Yeah, the mythology, it brought it down.
it did. It
It
did.
did. Yeah.
It's
And well, but I,
interesting.
I think all of that together, that kind of tells me how I've always felt about the pilot.
Yeah. I one of the things that's kind of that'll be fun about doing this is when we start to basically, after we've got a season, not just a season, but like the first and second season under our belt, or at least half the second season along with the first season under our belt, is we'll really be able to start to kind of see what the mean is, like
Sure.
where do most episodes actually fall? Because I have a feeling that you know 72% could actually be on the high end.
What if we get to, what if we get to season 5? Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be on the high end.
And quite frankly, even season 4,
And
like
season 4, some of it, yeah,
I will never forget, quite frankly, what our initial reviews taught me about season 4, and that
oh
was it
sure,
wasn't nearly as good as I remembered it.
remembered it, yeah,
Which is too bad.
yeah.
The thing is like, look, we love the show, and I mean, we'd have to do this again, basically. But I'm really interested to see what the project will look like after we've got 20 episodes under our belt.
Threw it in there, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how much time do we have left on the timer? I know you're timing this.
Yeah. So actually, believe it or not, we've got about 9 minutes left.
9 minutes left. All right. So here's I wanted to ask you, because I know I have something in mind. Do you have any like changes in your review from when we did it for the first episode, or any particular memories that stick out from when we recorded the first episode?
I remember, I think we kind of already touched on a lot of it. I remember that the car scene was a scene that we both really like hit on, that we enjoyed. The scene at the bar, Al, the conversation he has with Al, at the bar. Um, the episode, I think you're right. One of the things that you said, which has me kind of rethinking the writing a little bit, but whatever, is it does feel a little long. And I think it doesn't feel long while I watch it, and I think part of that is because I've seen it so many times. For a while, this was like the only episode I had on DVD. You know what I mean? Like, because it
Sure.
was released as a single DVD, and I had that
Yep.
DVD.
Yep.
And so I've seen this episode quite a few times, and it has this weird effect when you've seen something before, that sometimes it doesn't drag, even if it did initially. But I think that there's definitely some stuff that you could cut out. Um, the phone call scene still wrecks me. Um, I don't know that much has changed in my opinion on this. I remember one of the things I remember going into watching it the first time is I was prepared to not be kind to Jennifer Runyon's acting. And I don't know why, but I felt
I
that
remember
way.
that. Yes, yeah.
And then I watched it again, and then we recorded our first episode, and I was like, I was wrong. Like, she's great. She's
Mhm.
great. And I still feel that way now. So I don't think much has changed for me. I know that there will be episodes. I'm sure that there will be episodes coming up that have changed for me, but this one, not a lot changed.
Now, I think it may be important to note, we noted this before, like you and I are different in this, is like you watched the show from the beginning.
I did. Yeah, I saw
You
this
watched this when
live.
it aired. For me, I discovered the show in the middle of the second season, and then I didn't go back to watch the pilot and the first season episodes until USA Network started doing the reruns, which was concurrent with the start of the last season on NBC.
Hmm.
So to me, like, this was very much like prequel in my head, because I saw the pilot after seeing several episodes of Quantum Leap. But yeah, the phone call scene with his dad, I think, yeah, in college, like for an acting exercise in class one day, like being a friend, like we did this like as an acting scene
Yeah.
of the show. And I know you did something similar with A Leap Home.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I remember from recording that first episode is we lost the last half hour of it because your
That's
memory card ran out on the
right.
microphone. So we had to go back with Jessica, your wife. We had to go back with Jessica and re-record the last half hour and do it as spontaneously as we could sound, because we had lost it. And I remember afterwards, after we got home, I don't think either one of us like felt as great as what we wanted to do. And like, I think you even like floated the idea of re-recording the entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. How funny is that? I mean, we had some technical issues on occasion
Oh yeah.
during that initial run. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, we did lose a little bit of the spontaneity of it. I think, but ultimately, I don't think we lost like the meat of it. You know what I
Oh no, no,
mean?
no.
Like
Yeah.
I think that a lot of what was important to us and important to get out is still there, in all of its. I mean, that episode was long. That episode I think was almost 3 hours long.
Oh well, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and what a way to introduce ourselves to a listenership. um, but but it was important. I think one of the things that we kind of established, and we tried at times to trim things down a bit more. But I think one of the things that initial episode established for us is like it was important to really dig deep
Hmm.
and talk about what the other actors had done, talk about what the director had worked on before, talk about the writers, talk about the aspects of production that we were aware of from the material that we had available to us, whether it was Matt's book or the Quantum Leap book or what was on IMDb, whatever the case would be. We wanted to kind of get as much information because what we wanted more than anything was for the podcast to be um indispensable to anyone who was listening to it, as the best and most complete look at each individual episode as we could possibly make it,
Hmm.
while also supporting our initial mission, which was to contextualize the episodes. What did this episode mean when it was set in 1956? What did it mean when it aired in 1989? And what does it mean for us reviewing it in 2017? And I don't think we were always successful at that in on every episode. But I think that some of the episodes, especially some of the like more important episodes, if you will, I feel like we did,
Oh yeah.
we did all right.
Yeah. I don't know if like to contextualize the show is like really top of mind when we started, but we certainly found that groove.
Yeah.
We certainly found that groove as we went. I think I just noted if I'm doing my math right. So this first leap, well, we went from like 1989 production wise to 1956, so 33 years. So if this show to be made now, be going back to 1989.
Hey, how about that?
How about that?
Yeah. I think I think there are some fans out there that are working on some things.
Yeah. Yeah.
um Yeah, and I think that we would be doing a disservice if we didn't talk just a little bit about the upcoming pilot. Um, and there are certain aspects of the pilot that we've already talked about in our past few episodes, that there are some great parallels between Genesis and the upcoming pilot. Um, you know Beyond that 33 years, for instance,
Sure.
there's some really great parallels, with the characters, the backstory, and there's some fantastic new different stuff that is completely I think innovative for this show.
Mhm.
Because this is a successor, it's not just like a reboot or whatever. It's not even a spiritual successor. This is like, I mean, this is really tied to the original, and I think that there are some really wonderful nods, and like we mentioned, I think on the first episode that we talked about the pilot, the heart is there. It really
Yeah.
is. And I think that that's something that Genesis had from the
Sure.
get-go,
Oh yeah.
was the heart of the show.
Yeah.
And so much of that has to do with Sam. It's unfortunate, you mentioned it, and now I'm really thinking about it. It's unfortunate that they weren't able to connect that as much with Al. They did at the end when he gives Sam the phone number,
Sure.
but I feel like other than that moment, there weren't a lot of really truly great moments that the two of them were able to share compared to, say, Honeymoon Express,
Absolutely.
or
I agree.
a lot of stuff in the future. But
Yeah.
what about you? Final thoughts. Final thoughts.
I think those are my more. I think my overall feeling about the pilot is warmer now than it was when we initially reviewed it.
Okay.
Yeah, my knocking of the mythology aside, um, yeah, I think I'm much more warmer and receptive to the pilot this go around.
So like I said, I think I'm about the same.
Mhm.
There was something about watching it this time that I think like last time it felt like work. This time it
Oh,
didn't
sure.
feel like work, you know?
I got you.
Um
Yeah.
and and that's okay that it felt like work last time. But this time, yeah, I wasn't taking notes. I was just going off a feeling, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that for me, looking at our scores right now, 72%, 81%. I think that's pretty high. Certainly, there are going to be episodes that are higher, especially for you, and there's going to be episodes that are lower, especially for me.
Mm.
But ultimately, I don't know. What do you think of this format? What do you think?
I like it.
Yeah.
Gives us something. It gives uh maybe a different kind of audience to come in on. Like some people love the long form,
Yes.
couple hours, and some people love the half-hour tidbits. So if you were, like I said, if you were hesitant before to listen to our podcast, hope you find it now and dive in. And maybe to end on a positive, just on a
Well,
positive,
actually,
warm. Sure.
before you do that, I want you to hold that thought for just one second because I asked you what you thought of it. I am very interested to
Oh,
hear
sure.
what our listeners have to think
Sure.
of it. Whether you're a newer listener or you've been with us since the beginning or anywhere in between, let us know what your thoughts are. If you have any suggestions or anything, we're not going to change the rubric or the format. Like obviously we're going to keep that, but if there's anything else, please hit us up. Let us know what you think. And I just want to say honestly, genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to everyone that has engaged with us recently because the level of engagement that we've been seeing over the past few weeks has been perhaps more than we've seen in the past 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So we're really grateful for that. We appreciate all the comments, whether it's on Facebook, whether you're sending us direct messages, Twitter, whatever the case may be. We appreciate you all, and we're really looking forward to sharing the rest of this journey with you, and then obviously the march towards the unveiling of the new pilot. So,
Absolutely.
Dennis,
I would
with
say,
that
yeah,
said,
we have a lot of new group members. If you like our page on Facebook and you haven't like joined our group, make sure that you come over and you join our group. Just because if you see stuff from our page, the way Facebook algorithm works, you may not see it. But I think if you're in the group, you're much more likely to see it pop up in your news feed. So make sure to join the group. I'll do a shout out to new group members here coming up pretty soon. I need to be better about that and just engage more with the group. Um, that being said, on a final note before we do our outro, I just want to give just a very heartwarming note. Newell Alexander, the actor who plays Sam's dad in the pilot episode, he is still alive. And he is probably by far the oldest person who was in the pilot. Uh,
fantastic.
he was born in 1935, still alive, and has an acting credit according to IMDb as of 2 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, even still up
So
until the
he's
last.
done work since we recorded our original episode.
Yes, yeah, so he's he's actually done some acting work, which
Yeah.
is more than I can say for me. So,
um,
uh,
yeah, man, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that. When we did our initial run through, we would often find people who are no longer with us. Sometimes while we were recording, we'd be like going on IMDb and be like, "Oh, they
yeah,
died."
yeah,
um, something else that I wanted to get out there real quick, which unfortunately is not quite as heartwarming as that, is that stop off from the finale, Mirror Image, was Ukrainian. Um, so I'll just let people kind
yep.
of sit with that for a moment.
Mhm.
And obviously we have not shied away from talking about current events as we record and things that are going on in the real world. But quite frankly, I don't really have the words. So um, if you care to check out UNICEF's fund for Ukrainian children, excuse me. There are also a number of other great charities out there that I'm sure could use a little help right now. And if you can't, spare a dime, spare a thought, perhaps. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I meant to say something along those lines at the beginning of the episode, and then
I got your back.
catch you back. Thank you. So on that note, should we leap out here and say that, unless something breaks, and we need to talk about something else next week. Next week we'll be back with Star-crossed. Oh, I'm looking forward to that one.
Oh man.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Oh boy, yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
There's some great stuff in that episode.
Oh, there is. Like
That
I was not being sarcastic. I love that
yeah.
episode. So,
Uh, I like parts of it.
all right, all right,
We'll talk about it next time.
all right. Sounds
All
good.
right.
All right.
Well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate your listenership as always. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, stay safe out there. And if you are so inclined, hit us up on social media and let us know what you think. And we'll be back next week with Starcrossed, unless, like Dennis said, something comes up, which production is supposed to start here in a little over a week. So something could come up. You never know. We're waiting for that casting news. We don't have any inside info on the casting news. We've talked to the Observer. The Observer doesn't know what's happening in that arena, although we can only assume that there are choices that have been made at this point.
Hope so.
Yeah, I know. I would certainly hope so. So I'm really looking forward to learning who we're going to get to see in the fall. What faces will be playing these characters that we have these names and backgrounds for.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
All right, let's leap
All
out of
right.
here.
Leap out of here. Take care, everyone. Bye.